So today, by popular demand, I'm doing a video about the DJI Osmo Action 4 and Gyroflow. And why the hell would you even want to use an external stabilizing software for an action camera? Let's go. First of all, Gyroflow is a free software that uses your camera's inbuilt accelerometer and gyroscope data to stabilize the footage. Now, as I mentioned, it's free and it's really easy to use. You just have to make sure that your camera records the data. Now, if you're using the DJI Osmo Action 4, the DJI Osmo Action 3, the DJI Avata drone, or all the GoPros, I think, and pretty much every Insta360 camera, you get the gyroscope and accelerometer data baked into your video file, which means that if you have a software that can read that data, it can actually counteract all of the forces and all of the motions that you put on the camera while you were recording the video. So the accelerometer measures all of the motions and the gyroscope measures all of the rotations. And if you combine that together, put it in a software, counteract that, well, you get some really stable footage coming from your video files. But in order for that to work, you have to record your videos without the inbuilt electronic stabilization. So for the Osmo Action 4, it's the RockSteady. For GoPro, it's Hyper Smooth, and for Insta360, it's Steady Flow or something like that. I mean, I sold my Insta360 X3 very quickly, so I actually forgot what the stabilizer was called. But anyway, I think the Insta360 actually has the best stabilization of the three, but all of the three companies really do a good job at stabilizing your footage. So again, why the Gyroflow software? Now, many of you commented on my recent videos where I was showing how the 1/50th of a second cinematic motion blur shutter speed really messes up your electronic stabilization on your action cameras. And that goes for the DJI's Osmo Action, the GoPros, the Insta360s. As long as the shutter speed is slow enough to produce motion blur on a very motiony image, well, then the electronic stabilizer has trouble stabilizing the video and producing a nice smooth sensation. So this is where the idea of using an external stabilizing software that actually uses the accelerometer and gyroscope data comes into play. Okay, so now let's look at some of the examples of the RockSteady stabilized video, the RockSteady that is within your camera, the non-stabilized footage, and then the Gyroflow footage. So here you see non-stabilized and with the Gyroflow. It pretty much does the same thing as the RockSteady in-camera stabilizer. So in-body camera stabilizer and then Gyroflow. I mean, you can hardly see any difference. Now, I am using Davinci Resolve, and there is actually a plugin for Davinci Resolve where you can get Gyroflow within Davinci Resolve. You can find it under Open Effects, and it becomes an effect that you put onto your video file and you get Gyroflow. So here, for instance, you can see Gyroflow. You can find this under Effects, Open Effects, Filters, and then if you just type in here, Gyro, you have Gyroflow. You put this onto your video and then you get all of this. Then just use load the current file. So this plugin is going to actually load the metadata, the accelerometer and gyroscope data into this file, and then you can adjust a few settings and you will get nice and smooth video. So if I turn this off, you can see how this looks originally, so like this, and then if I turn Gyroflow on, you can see how much smoother this is. It's pretty much doing the same thing as the RockSteady stabilizer in the camera. So again, why the Gyroflow? Well, actually, it comes down to that shutter speed. So I'm going to show you an example where I shot the video with 1/50th of a second shutter speed, first with RockSteady and then with the Gyroflow stabilizer. And the answer is going to be pretty simple. Let's watch this. This is shot with RockSteady enabled in-camera stabilizer, and this is with Gyroflow. Now you can see I've shot both of these videos with 1/50th of a second cinematic motion blur video, and you can see that I have motion blur here on the edges. But pay attention to how RockSteady stabilizes and then how the Gyroflow stabilizes. I mean, Gyroflow actually looks better. So this is without and this is with Gyroflow, and this is now again with RockSteady. So Gyroflow definitely works better if the shutter speed is that 1/50th of a second compared to the in-body RockSteady stabilizer. But that's not the biggest issue. Actually, the question from many of you was, can you get rid of the flickering in the highlights if you use Gyroflow instead of the RockSteady? So let me show you an example of what I mean. Okay, so this is an example with RockSteady enabled, and you can see the flickering in the highlights. Now, I've used this same video in many of my previous videos, so some of you might have already seen this, but that's actually the issue. Once the shutter speed is set to 1/50th of a second, the stabilizer has trouble, stitching the frames together, and you have this kind of highlights flickering happening. And this is especially present when you have low light. But what happens if you use Gyroflow in the same similar situation? So here is Gyroflow with that 1/50th of a second. Now this is without Gyroflow, and then Gyroflow gets enabled again. But pay attention to the highlights where the trees are in the distance. So you can see that, with Gyroflow, even though the footage is stable, you can see that the highlights are still flickering. So Gyroflow, in essence, doesn't really solve the problem with that 1/50th of a second highlights blurring. Now, the issue is not with the RockSteady stabilizer, it's actually with the shutter speed. Now, because the video is recorded non-stabilized, it's not on a gimbal, it's actually just recorded as it is, shaky and moving all around, and then you apply the electronic stabilizer or the Gyroflow, whichever way you want to go. The footage is still recorded with that shaky state, and that 1/50th of a second shutter speed actually causes an excessive motion blur in the highlights. So no matter how much you want to stabilize it afterwards, it's recorded that motion blur already within the file because you were walking around with the camera and you were shaking it very violently, like pulsy, shaky recording. That means that every time you shake the camera, you get that motion blur recorded in the video. So if you stabilize it afterwards, it's not going to get rid of that. So to summarize this whole topic, it doesn't matter what kind of stabilization you use on your camera. It could be an in-body RockSteady or hyper smooth stabilization, or in post-production with the free software Gyroflow, which is really impressive, to be completely honest. The problem with the flickering highlights is due to that 1/50th of a second shutter speed. So no matter how much you stabilize things in post, the motion blur is recorded when you were recording the video, because you were not recording it stabilized on a gimbal with smooth walking. You were actually shaking the camera, and that motion blur is already baked in to the file. So does Gyroflow actually do a better job at stabilizing that cinematic 1/50th of a second shutter speed motion blur videos? Well, actually no. I mean, it does do a better job at stabilizing the video overall, but is it worth using with 1/50th of a second shutter speed on any camera? Well, I'm going to say no. So if you want to have nice, smooth and clear images, you still need to record your videos with at least that 1/100th of a second shutter speed, and then maybe use Gyroflow, which again for action cameras makes completely no sense. Anyway, these are my thoughts on this topic. I hope you got something from this video. Let me know down below in the comments your experiences, and if you have any further comments or questions. Also, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button for the algorithm. It actually does help. So thank you, and I'll see you in one of these two videos if you want to stick around on the channel. Bye bye.